Hello, and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk About It. We're here to investigate incest and destigmatize childhood sexual crimes. Many people don't want to talk about this. We do. With me tonight is my guest, Sylvia Trevino, and I'm so excited that she's here. I'm going to learn her story with you as we go into this. But before we get into her story, I'd like to ask you, Sylvia, what your motivation is to be here with us tonight. People often ask me that question, why I do all the work I do. So I like to hear from your heart about your motivation to be here and share your story tonight.
Well, my motivation comes from I am a childhood sexual abuse survivor, and I've just recently come into some really, really good healing with that trauma, those trauma wounds, and working with women. And the more I work with these women, the more doors that are just blown open. It's like, you know, just opening up an entire another world that, I didn't live in. I didn't share my story. I did like I am now. Now I'm empowered. I've received some really good healing, although our trauma wounds never go away.
Right.
Um, but through Jesus Christ, I have found such tremendous healing and really want to reach other people who are living in the shame and the darkness and bring all of that into the light. Because if I can just help one person through this that you're doing, and thank you, by the way,
Oh, you're
um,
welcome.
that means everything.
Yes, that's awesome. Thank you. That's so beautiful. I love that. So I don't know your story. And so if you could just start with what you're comfortable with, bring us into, when the abuse started and that sort of thing. I'm eager to hear your story just because I do believe that by sharing our stories, I can help lift some of that weight with you. So I'm going to give it back
And
to you and just let you share that with us.
okay. I was raised in a private Catholic school. Um, so I was a Catholic. My father was my abuser, and the abuse began around, I think, age four or five. He was a pillar in the community. He was a CCD teacher, which is a Catholic teacher. You have to take CCD classes for different things. And so, he was on the staff. He was a teacher, staff member at my school slash church. Um, he was a business owner. He was a, a very strong advocate for the Chicano community in Dallas, Texas. At the time, I was raised in Dallas, in North Dallas, so not any surrounding areas. We were in the center, and my dad was often on the news. He was an architect. He did public buildings. So there's schools I can drive by that he designed. When I go visit Dallas, there's all kinds of, still our parents do work, but to be able to see the
Right.
work physically, is really something. But so just a man that you would not think, would be an abuser. Um, and there was grooming that went along with that before it began. I think actually before and during, there was still the grooming. The, my shoulder hurts, can you massage? And then, sure. And, get in there, the tension and stuff. And even my mom would be right there, either on the sofa, relaxing, TV, or they would be relaxing in the bedroom reading, the newspaper in the evening after dinner. That was, their thing that they did. My mom was totally unaware of any of this, by the way. And so it would start with that, and then it would be, oh, my back, and then we would go, further. And I really suppressed all my memories, as most of us do,
Right.
until adulthood. The abuse only went on, well, I say only, it went on for 2 years that I know of, 2 to 3. And I never confronted my father about it. And I had a lot of wounds. I had a lot of things manifest from my story.
Mhm.
And it just wasn't until I became more into adulthood that I started addressing with therapy, the issues that I was having, the promiscuous relationships, the relationships that I couldn't make last because I was
Mhm.
carrying so much anger inside of me. And so I was very difficult to be in a relationship with somebody because I was toxic because of, all that junk that was going on that I
Right.
was hiding.
Me too. I was the same way. I got in counseling for the very reason that I couldn't. I was in a very abusive 18-year marriage. And when I came out of that marriage, I was a wreck. I was an absolute wreck. And I went into
Mhm.
counseling to try to figure out how to have a relationship. Yeah, those are lasting wounds. So talk about some of those things. You said that it manifested in your life. Talk a little bit more about what that looked like when you were young. Most of us don't stay in our story because we can't, right? We don't have
Right.
any tools to remember. Like we need to get
Mhm.
that memory gone so that we can get on with life. And I think it's
Yeah.
a grace in the when it's happening to forget, so that we can live. But then, God does have to bring us back so he can redeem and restore those parts. So
Amen.
what was that? You said it lasted 2 or 3 years. Is that what you said?
Yeah. 2 to 3 years. And really only on he would always the abuse would always be when my mom wasn't there.
Mm-hmm.
She would leave, to go run errands,
Mm-hmm.
and it would just be easier, on the weekend since my father was home from work for us to stay home so she could get, a lot of that done. And so it would be in those times when the abuse would take place. And my sister was also involved. Um, she, by the way, we've never spoken about it.
Oh, you
Um,
haven't.
no, it's never come up. We've had a very not tumultuous, a
Mm-hmm.
very not like real sisters, very on the surface, not close. And I feel
Right.
like a lot of that is due to the abuse that took place.
Yeah,
But God is really
yes, and that is another manifestation. In fact, in the shower today, I was very sad and thinking about my sister that we used to play games a lot. And of course, in these families now, all of our siblings are apart, there's all this contention. We haven't spoke to each other for years and years. And it's really sad. And it is truly a result of coming through an incestuous house. So I'm sorry about that. It's painful, right? But it's hard. It is like you're saying, just another piece of it. But go ahead and continue.
but God has, for anybody out there, there's hope. God has really when I started my journey to heal, it's a 7-step study. When I started that, at the beginning, they asked what are the top 3 reasons or the top 3 things that you want to get out of this. And one of mine was healing with my sister and I's relationship. And God has worked some real miracles in that area. But yeah, it
And,
caused a
and
lot of
yet you guys have not talked about this abuse together.
no, we haven't.
Do you think that
Um,
you will?
I think that we will. God has already moved in a family member that I won't say because I don't know if she's comfortable about it, but she's a family member. And, I was praying, God, just let this come out, let it get into the light. It needs to be addressed because I see all those things in my sister
Hmm.
that were happening in me
Hmm.
before I got my true, real healing in Jesus Christ. And
Hmm.
and so God, did a work. We were as a family, we were out in several cars shopping after Christmas, the day after and exchanging, and we go to a big lunch all together. And I was alone with a couple family members in a car. We were waiting for some other family that were at different shops, in the shopping center. And this family member just flat out asked me, were you and my mother sexually abused when you were children?
Mm.
And I was like, you know, jaw on the
Wow.
ground.
Right.
But,
It is more evident sometimes than we like to think, right? I meet
Yeah,
people and wonder myself, like, you have every sign of
yeah,
coming through
yeah.
this, you
And now
know?
we know that. And,
Right.
this is a family member that's, coming into her own. She's,
Hmm.
32, I think. And I just said, oh my gosh, thank you, Jesus. This is the beginning of
Yes.
the process of bringing it out into the light. And so I'm
And
just,
that's a difficult thing to do because you don't know if your sister will want to allow that, right? Or if she
yes,
could even say to, I don't have memories. I have a couple siblings that do that, that did have memories and then said they were fake memories because it's very difficult, right? And I have another sister
yeah.
that does remember, dad sexually abusing us. So you and your sister were in the rooms together with your dad?
No, he would have me go first, and then he would have my sister.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
and I remember one time it was just me. I think my mom and my sister were at brownies or, some kind of activity like that. And it began the after, like, it seemed like the massaging, then it became like he was a teacher, and he was teaching me
Mm,
about the anatomy and about how God made us and how God made for woman and man to make a baby, and
mhm.
then showing me you know his parts and explaining to me, in detail, like it was a classroom
Right. I've heard
type
this a
situation.
lot. Yeah.
And it felt so uncomfortable. It felt so wrong. But again, at that age,
We
we
have
don't
no
know.
choice. No, we have no choice. We have no
And
choice.
I'm thinking, this is my father, even though I really don't want to see these things.
Mhm.
And that was the beginning. And then from there, it moved to the bedroom. And um, we, um, he would really, only thing he would have me do things to him. He never once touched me other than maybe holding my hand. Um, and again, when I would be done with the whole lesson part, I really don't remember those times that my sister was there, because I would remember leaving the room
Mhm.
and when she was there, and then she would go in next. And in those bathroom situations, I I don't remember coming out and her being there. So, I think a lot of the issues that we have, I won't be surprised whenever we do talk about it, because I know, I feel in my heart, God is slowly, um, coming, is going to come to light. But
Mhm.
I think her abuse was possibly worse than mine.
Mm.
And so I think that kind of manifested a lot of that anger and hatred towards me, that she probably didn't even realize why she was doing it.
Right. Right. How many years apart are you guys?
We're 14 months apart.
Oh, okay. So pretty close. And
We're
it's
very
just the two of you then.
uh-huh. It's just the two
Okay.
of us. So she was just one grade ahead of me always.
And so where was your mother during all this time? She would just be gone, but I guess the
Mo-
question is, you didn't go to her and chat with her. And people always have that question, but it doesn't occur to us, does it?
No, it
Right.
never even, well, and he would always tell me, not angrily, but he would just say, and you don't need to tell anybody about this.
Hmm.
This is just something that, you know, everybody goes through. And, just your mom doesn't need to know. This is just something between, you and I. This is our little secret. And so it just made me terrified to tell my mom, even when I got
Right.
older.
Right.
It wasn't until I went through Journey to Heal that I finally told her, because my mom is such a strong woman. She's a spirit-filled Christian. She's a prayer warrior. Um, she's the sweetest, kindest person. She was an elementary school principal, and she was working to get her master's degree when at SMU, when a lot of the abuse occurred. and that's where she would be. And so when I shared the story, and she was like, well, how could this have happened? Because she was a very active mother. Like, she was Brownie troop leader. She actually worked at the Catholic school. She was a teacher where we went so she could keep an eye on us and, have lunch with us. And I thought it was so cool that I had my mom,
Right.
at school with me.
Right.
But, just a really, she just has the biggest, kindest heart, and so innocent. She's only ever been with one man. She's maybe had
And
one drink in her life.
right. So are your parents together still then?
No.
Were
And
were they split at that time, or yeah, what does that look like?
no, they divorced. My dad became, which I found out from an ex-boyfriend we were still friends, obviously didn't talk all the time, but as friends can be. And he called me. He was working as a general manager at a very luxurious or very expensive strip club, a gentleman's club. And
Your
it was very
father
expensive.
was, or an ex-boyfriend?
No, the ex-boyfriend, he was
Okay.
manager.
Okay.
He was general manager of it. And it was very expensive. Like, you pull up and there's all kinds of like exotic cars. And
Mm,
so anyway, he called me and he said, I would like to have dinner with you because I have something I want to share with you. And I was like, what? Like, what? He was like, I don't want to talk about it. I just want to sit down and be able to have a conversation with you because it's kind of
mm,
sensitive information, but it's something that I think you need to know. So I said, okay, when do you want to have dinner? So we went out to
right.
dinner, and it shocked me, but then after it didn't, that my dad was a regular at this club.
Oh, wow.
He owned his own architecture firm and he did very well. He provided an amazing, we never wanted for anything. We had a beautiful
Mhm.
home, pool, country club, cars, and he was a regular there. And my dad knew him because obviously it was my ex-boyfriend. So we would get together every once in a while for dinner. He would come to some family stuff. And he said, I was so shocked. I couldn't believe that was your dad. Um, and he said on top of that he has a favorite and he's taken her to Mexico for vacation a couple times.
Oh, wow. Yeah, not
Yeah.
surprising really, right? I think
Not,
I
yeah.
yeah, I think these men tend to be hedonistic where, just there are no rules when it comes around sexual things. I mean, definitely my father
Yeah.
was that way as well. And I've, listening to all these stories, many of these men they step out on their moms and,
Mhm.
so were your parents together at that time?
They were together. Yes. And I really, really struggled with telling my mom.
Oh, I
However,
bet.
I knew that their marriage was very rocky, at no fault of my mother's.
Hmm.
Um, he would lose his temper. She would cook dinner. He would say, this is terrible. You can't even cook, just he started to become he wasn't like that when we were growing up. But I think after the years of, abuse, I can't imagine the guilt and the shame that he lived in, knowing what he had done to his children and to possibly, other people. I don't know.
Right.
I
Yeah,
don't
I'm not
think
sure
so.
that they feel guilt and sorrow the way that we do. I
Well,
really am
yes,
hard
sure.
pressed to think that they have those
Yes.
feelings. I think that when you can abuse a child, you're so given over, your state of mind is not the way our state
That's
of mind
true.
is. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right about that. So I saw them coming to an end just because of
Mhm.
this crazy behavior. He had been really, really sick. He got meningitis, bacterial,
Mm.
and he almost died quite a few times. And he had to go to rehab, and he was a walking miracle. And after that, he was never the same. And so they divorced after 38 years of marriage. And my
Mm.
mom wanted to be so far away from him because they were both, of course, my mom being a principal um, in Latino neighborhoods, in more impoverished neighborhoods. She was on the news a lot. She was in the community. My dad and her would always go to these fundraisers and things. So she said, I have to leave Dallas. Like, everybody knows your dad and
Right.
I.
Right.
So she came, I'm in Austin now because this is where all her family is. And Austin was always a second home to me. I spent my summers here with my grandmother and my cousins and aunts and uncles, and every Christmas, every Thanksgiving, all the major holidays. So moving here was, a no-brainer. I was so happy to be out of
So it was
Dallas.
like a break. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
a break from your father. So
Yeah.
how old were you when you decided I really need to look into changing my life and healing from this incest? What led you
I
into
was,
that?
I was 22, 23. I had shared with a boyfriend. We hadn't been dating very long, maybe 6 months. And I shared a little bit of my story. And I said, just I would like to ask you for patience and
Mhm.
understanding because, I was sexually abused as a child by my father. And I've got some things that I need to really work on. And I want you to know that. And in sharing that, he just had a very negative response.
I'm sorry.
He said, I seem to always attract, not the lost, not the like,
The
a broken down
broken.
person.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
broken.
Like I
Right.
always,
We're all damaged.
right. I was like,
Right.
so that was so hurtful to me. But
Oh, yeah. Boy,
also,
the gift that keeps on giving, right?
yeah, right. And of course, his behavior changed, and he wasn't
Mhm.
willing, and that's fine. That ended up being a blessing, but that did really force me into, I've got to get myself right,
Mhm.
and I've got to start to address, what happened, and I need to quit hiding it. I need to speak about it to somebody, not just a boyfriend or, we have to be really careful who we share our story with. I've
Right.
learned because
Right.
we don't always know how they're going to react. We don't know,
It's so true.
and if they don't know, I think that's when, like this guy, he didn't know that
Hmm.
they don't know anything about it. So they see it, like you say, is, incest is like, you know,
Right, exactly. We're all
like the
messed up.
scarlet letter.
Run.
Yeah.
I actually thought about that in the kitchen today about, just kind of talking to God, gazing out at the mountains. And I thought, Father, it's so hard to overcome all the brokenness. My father began when I was 3, because I turned 4 when we moved out of that house, and he raped me well into
Wow.
my teen years. And, all of those years, it's hard to reconstruct and feel yourself
Yeah.
that not damaged, right? I mean, it's all I
Yeah.
knew was damage. And so sometimes,
Yeah.
it is like, how do we, while I live a very beautiful life, I really do. I have a wonderful career, beautiful home, beautiful children. But it's always like you said in the beginning, these scars stay with us. Thank God they're scars, because scars are
Yeah.
healed, right? and
Amen.
that territory is usually pretty strong. But there is a huge cost to us. There's a huge cost to us coming through lives like this. And then you said that your father was in the church. I really believe, Sylvia, with much of my being, that this spirit of religion is what hides the spirit of incest, right? Because you hear it all the time. My father was this
Absolutely.
huge Baptist, guy. We had Bible study in the front, rape in the back room. I mean, that was just
Yeah.
the truth of our homes. And people
Yep.
looked up to my father. Like, they would ask him, like he was the Bible answer man, and he was raping
Yeah.
his children.
Yeah.
So
My grandpa
talk to
said
me a
that
little bit
too.
about that's what makes it very complicated for us then when we grow up, and now who's God to us, right? So where was God for you as a child? What did that look like when all of this mayhem was entering into your being?
Well, when I was in Catholic school, of course, we had theology class, every day, along with, the other math and all that. Um, but the Catholic Church doesn't really ever talk about the Holy Spirit and having intimate relationship with God,
Right.
other than you read the missals, and you do the Stations of the Cross, and you do all these ceremonial type things in the Catholic Church. And I
Religion.
never, yeah, religion. It's
Right.
religion. I tell people I'm not a religious person. I'm a spiritual person that believes Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior.
Right.
That's
Me too.
what I say. And so I really never I'm so grateful that I never really held God accountable for that. I would just pray to him and just say, God, please, tend to my heart and my pains and my hurt. And I would even tell him, help me keep this secret. That would be my prayer
Wow.
as a child.
And see how sad that is. It's such a distorted thing that, and I appreciate that you said that, because sadly, as children, we were burdened with all of these things that are the very opposite of what God would teach us, the very opposite. God doesn't hold secrets. God wants us to shout these things from rooftops. But, it just saddens my heart for you, because this burden to keep this secret and then to pray to God to help you. And I know that hurt his heart, because he would never have you keep this
Right.
secret, right? I mean, it's the opposite of who he is.
Yeah. And I really just thought nobody would ever believe me
Right.
because of who my father was, always on TV, always in the newspaper, always at the school teaching and, just involved
It's
in
remarkable what two different lives that they live, right? Here they are, these horrifying, perverted pedophiles. And
yes.
then they have this honorable place in society. And it happens a lot. I interviewed this woman who her father was a doctor. And so he, you know what I mean? Like, she was raised in this kind of really nice home. And I mean,
Uh-huh.
and then every night he came in and raped her. Like, it's, you're not alone in that. But I think that people have it wrong. Like, it's this weird uncle that sits in the corner in a trench coat. No,
Right.
these are good looking people who are in the
Yes.
community. You would never know that's who they were ever.
Yes.
You just wouldn't. They
Oh, yeah.
mostly don't look like perverts. People like
No.
them, right? They're
Oh, yeah. My
charismatic
dad
and
dressed to the nines. He
yep.
always had, I mean, in the 70s, it was so hilarious when they had the real shiny shirts that were real popular with the
Yes.
big collar and stuff.
Lapels.
Yeah,
Right.
lapels and the white hat and
Yes.
shoes and all that. But he
Snazzy.
always dressed to the nines, not outlandish or anything, but always very sophisticated and polished and put together. And yeah, and look
Right.
at the Catholic Church. I have classmates that were being molested by the priest there in the back. Our church was so humongous. It's one of the largest Catholic schools and churches in the country.
Oh,
And
okay.
yeah, the actual cathedral in the church is it's one of the top three of beautiful churches in this country. It's absolutely stunning and a work of art. But so huge. And so, the not the choir boys, what are the altar boys? Um, there was at least three of my class members that gratefully have won a class action lawsuit against the Jesuit
Oh,
priest.
wow. Good for
And
them.
yeah, it was rough, but they kept fighting and they kept
That's
fighting. They
so cool. Now,
let the
I
Catholic
bet,
Church.
right. I bet because this was your father, you did not turn him in. I'm going to assume. Am I assuming right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, cases of incest, even the cops don't want anything to do with them. Nobody wants anything to do with them.
Mhm.
And the reason why I really wanted this channel and to honor our stories is we're victims. We are victims that
Yeah.
people don't want to listen to, right? Especially incest. Incest has its own stigma that's attached to it that's even deeper, right, than your neighbor or a priest. While none of those things are good, incest is very layered and it's very complicated because we love them. They're our parents, right? And so you find yourself, and talk to me about that a little bit, this love bond between you and your father. It's what keeps us quiet. It's what keeps our stories hidden. It keeps us away from healing because we have this love bond. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so my dad and I actually had a lot in common. I had a lot of traits that he had. He was an amazing artist. He went to the Chicago Art Institute and got a full scholarship,
Wow.
um, doing three different paintings. It was for anybody who they reached out to people that wanted to go to school that had applied there but couldn't afford it. And so they had to do 3 different, paintings. And then of course, who were, the top. So he basically won his schooling there at the Chicago Art Institute. Then he came back to Texas and went to the University of Texas. It's just where he met my mom. And then became involved, got his degree in art. Then he went to Texas Tech when we were older teenagers. We all moved to Lubbock, Texas. And he went to architectural school. It was a 2-year program to become an architect on top of your bachelor's, which I love Lubbock. It was amazing. I got to go to public school, so I was like, yeah. No
You were
uniform.
normal for a minute.
I didn't
Yeah.
have to go to church every day.
Right. Right.
I mean, I went to church every day but Saturday, because we went to church every morning, Monday through Friday. And then, of course, you always had to go to church on Sunday.
Oh,
So
wow.
I was like, wow, 6 days every week of not going to church. Woo-hoo.
Right. Right. Right.
Especially when it doesn't mean anything, not so much now in the church I go to, which is a spirit-filled church, and I love it. But all you do is just rehearse the words in your head. It's the same exact thing every day. But anyway, so we moved to Lubbock. He got his architectural degree. Then he opened up his firm. And then eventually he went to Harvard and got his degree in city planning. And then came back. His firm stayed up, while he was in Boston going to finish that college. But, he was just I was so afraid to speak ill of him because I just didn't think people would believe me.
Right, right. So what did that, and I totally understand that. There was this, I watched a video of a woman, I can't remember her name, unfortunately, but she was Miss America like in 1956 or something. But she, you know what she said? People don't believe me today. Why would they ever? What makes you ever think they're going to believe a 10-year-old? Because people have a hard time believing me today. And her mother didn't believe her ever. She died not believing her. And so, it's really true for all of us. But you said in the beginning that you actually went and confronted your father. What did that look like?
Um, it was a rage. We were arguing about something. I had moved in. I had gone back to school at the time, and so I was working part-time at his firm as the receptionist and do some other, menial tasks. And so I moved in back with my parents, which I'd been, out for years. I didn't, stay there after, like, I went to college and did, the normal thing. But and he just was very argumentative with me, very temperamental with me. And I just, my mom wasn't there. And I just said, you know what? You have no reason to talk to me the way you're talking. If anything, I need to be talking to you like that, because what you did to me was so vile and so disgusting that to me, you have no voice. I have my voice now. I didn't have my
Wow.
voice before, but now that I'm older and I'm in this house, I will express my voice, and you better pray I don't ever do it with mom around.
What did he say to that?
He was not happy.
No, I
He just,
imagine.
he just looked at, I think he was shocked,
Mm-hmm.
and he just turned around and walked away, went back to his office.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, he didn't, because I mean, what can you say? He did it. What's he gonna do? Say he didn't do it?
Right. Well, they usually do. I mean, my father certainly did. Then all of a
Yes.
sudden they become this big thing about. So he never did deny it. Did you ever talk to him about it again?
No, I didn't. He passed away, and
Oh, okay.
he had heart issues ever since he had that bacterial meningitis, because it damaged his heart. Um, and so he went to the ER in Dallas, and then they immediately put him on the surgery table. So by the time anybody called me, he had already gone into surgery, and I was here in
Mm,
Austin. So, and he passed away about 10 or 15 minutes into the surgery. But he did tell my uncle to tell me. I'm very close with my uncle James, just sweet, sweet, precious man. And I always wish that he would have been my father, because of his just kind heart, and he loved the
right.
Lord, but
That's
he
cool.
really loved the Lord. Like, it wasn't deceitful in any way like my father. but he told me, he said, your father wanted me to tell you that he's sorry. And he apologized before he went into surgery.
Wow.
And he said, he said he was crying. And he said, you have to tell Sylvia, I'm so, so sorry. What I did to her
Wow.
it was disgusting. It was horrible. And tell her that I love her and I want her to be happy.
Wow. Wow. That brings
So
tears to my eyes. How did that feel, hearing those words?
it felt really good.
Yeah.
It
Before
took,
my father died, he apologized too. And I'll tell you,
oh,
it doesn't take away, it doesn't take it
no.
away, but it helps, right?
Yeah. At least to, first of all, acknowledge, just,
Yes.
an acknowledgement is one thing. And then on top of that, just saying, I hope that she can forgive me one day.
And did
And
he not say to tell your sister as well?
no, he told my sister in person. He called her into the room before he went
Oh,
into
he
surgery.
did.
He told her in person
And
and
just,
apologized to her.
and you and your sister have never talked. Yeah, I really pray that you guys can talk and heal that through. I bet that will be very healing. What did that feel like then, growing up with her, knowing that you guys shared the secret with your father? How did that manifest itself in the house?
Well, I think, we had such just quote a normal, high school, junior high, we went to Lubbock. We were there for a year and a half. Um, and we both just loved it. We had a ball. We loved the neighborhood. We loved our school. We had good friends. And, the only thing we really fought about at that time was like borrowing each other's clothes and makeup and
Hmm.
stuff like that. And, oh, you took my shirt, you stretched it out, or, you know, you took
Right.
my shoes and put this, just that kind of stuff. We were at that point, we were in that mode of heart protectors, and
Yeah.
we're keeping it all in. We hadn't come out with it. And then when we moved back to Dallas, she was gone to college. I think we lived in our home that we moved into for maybe it was like a year and a half. And then she went off to college. So I was a year and a half younger. So I was 15 when she left for college.
Mm.
I missed a grade. So when I think it was when she went to Texas Tech, and I think it's when we separated at that time. That's when I could feel our relationship changing. Um,
Mm.
and I think, obviously her and I were both more aware of the abuse. And I feel like I was a reminder to her of bad things, of, those things that happen with us.
Right.
And that
That's so sad.
association it caused her to have a block. I mean, I felt real hate.
You were triggering to her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I felt a real hatred coming from her that was very, very painful.
Oh, I'm
Um,
so sorry.
because
Yeah,
I've always
so
been,
yeah, so often the sibling relationships are so damaged. It's so true. So you've come to your mom and you've talked about that, and unfortunately the family structure and design, when incest is in a home, it's really it's just it's havoc everywhere, right? I mean,
yeah.
everything's destroyed. So when you go to your mom and you talk this through, how did you guys come to this understanding to move forward? What did that look like? And I'm
Um,
curious that it's sad that your sister couldn't have been included in that, right?
yeah. Yeah. And I've prayed that, if God will give either me a window to speak to
Hmm.
her and give us that opportunity, or even give my mom, because my mother feels terrible for my sister. And I said, Mom, you can go to her and
Right.
you can tell her that And she said, but I don't want to drag all that up for her. I said, you're not gonna. I said,
Well, it's
if
already there.
yeah,
It's
right.
already there.
I said, the only thing that could happen from that is good. There's nothing bad that
Absolutely. I really
comes from
believe it's love that confronts, right? Jesus
yeah.
confronted all the time. And I think it was his love that did that, right? He was a freedom fighter. So he was trying to free people, and he knew people didn't want the message of freedom, but there were people that did want it. You know what I mean? And so it is a message of love when you go to somebody and say, I'm concerned. And I know, because as you and I know, you don't put this away without dealing with it. You just don't. It continues to work out in your life, whether you deal with it or not, right? It manifests in all kinds of ways, through addictions, through, overeating, through promiscuity, as you said, workaholic, I mean, you name it. We've all probably done it just to escape pain, right? Yeah. So I really do hope that happens for you guys, and I'll really be praying for that for you guys as I spend time in prayer. But I wanted to ask you, you said that you're in this program. I'd like you to talk about the program, but you said that they asked you to write down 3 things. I'd like to know what those 3 things were and how those are going for you, because it's cool to talk about what healing looks like and that sort of thing.
The wins, the praise reports.
Yeah, right. Exactly. The wins. I love that. That's right. Yeah. So let's talk about that some.
So number one was, my sister. They weren't in, all 3 were just as important to me. So when I say number one was my sister, and God is really working miracles. We're having more, it's not surfacey anymore. She never used to call me. She never used to text me. She would never send cards or presents for any occasion. She would for my mom, but not for me. And God turned that around last year for Mother's Day. She sent me the most beautiful card. And, I opened it up, and it had scriptures in it, and it talked about what an amazing mother that I was as a sister. The card said, I admire you so much for the mom that you are. And almost like she sees me from afar at the kind of mother that I am to my daughter. And the card was beautiful. And then she wrote, just a few things. She's very much like a perfectionist. And so, her handwriting is perfect, and, everything looks like calligraphy and gorgeous. But she highlighted 2 words. I can't remember what they were in the card, where the print was, and she circled it. And, that's not like her. That's not Rebecca. She's very,
You can't wreck it.
And then she signed it, your big sister, Rebecca. And
That's
she
so
underlined
beautiful.
your big sister, telling me, I hear you, I feel you.
That's cool. And I think that the older siblings in these homes have a lot of guilt, right? And so they don't know what to do with that. I know that my older sister one time came to me and said, Jody, I remember Dad was on his knees in front of you on that couch, and I didn't know what to do, and he raped me. I was only 3. But, can you imagine her walking in, and I can only assume he'd done things to her. She doesn't really talk about it, but the guilt that comes around that, like in my book, I even write, I don't hold her accountable for any of it. But again, these tragedies and these terrible burdens that come into children that are in these homes like that, your sister may be struggling with guilt that she's not even aware of, right, Sylvia?
And that's exactly what I thought. To me, that said, I am your big sister. I may not have acted like I was your big sister,
Right.
but I don't blame her.
Of course not.
For one
Of
bit,
course not.
just as much a victim as me,
Right.
So,
Absolutely. All right. And so your second goal. No, and that's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful.
other
Your
beautiful things happen. So number 2 is number 2 for me to have any more nightmares or dreams. I was having really, really bad dreams about, and the dreams were so much worse than the abuse was. And I would just wake up, crying. I would wake up sweating. I would feel, when I would wake up sometimes in fear, I could feel like this heavenly demonic, not heavenly, this demonic, like here's my body,
presence.
and this demon, like
Yes.
over me. I felt like if I reached out, I would actually physically touch a demon.
Yeah.
And
I had a lot of that as a child as well.
just being horrified in your bed and you can't move. And I thought,
Mhm.
gosh, if I could just be like Superwoman and flip on the light without moving, you're paralyzed in
Right,
fear.
right.
And it's
And
because
bringing that up, it is, I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Continue.
it's because our hearts are yearning for God and we want that healing, and the enemy doesn't want us to have that.
Well, and these men are so dark. I mean, I really do believe that this is a spiritual battle. If Satan can get us when we're young, we're almost destroyed to the point where we can't walk
Amen.
out, right? And so I think there's a lot of darkness in this. And the great battle is, like I've begun fasting some too because of moving out in what I do. I really do feel like it's a spiritual battle. Well, Jesus won that battle. There's a real battle going on down here for souls. And when
Yeah.
you hurt us when we're children that terribly, fear is huge, but I do believe that there's demonic presences in these people. I think that you cannot be a pedophile without it. It's just my
Nope.
belief. I mean,
I
I
do.
saw it in my parents. Every time I talk to a survivor, they'll immediately, I mean, not immediately, but when you brought up this spiritual presence, darkness is always around it,
Yes.
always. And that's why, to me, Jesus is that freedom fighter that comes in and says no more. My nights are peaceful, Sylvia, for the first time, and I'm 59. And honestly, the last 2 years have been the most peaceful in my whole life because I've had horrible dreams about the lady being murdered, about, just all of that, reoccurring nightmares that would come in, but feeling the presence on my bed, like that crease when my father would come in and that bed go down, and waking up with that dark, presence. So did you feel that around your father when he was abusing you?
No, I didn't, because I was so
Loving.
young
Yeah.
and so
Right.
loving, and you know, about it. It was never full of, um, like there wasn't hatred or,
Hmm.
anything. I mean, it obviously was wrong. And then too, I think because it happened so young,
Hmm.
that I can't imagine what I would have done when I was a teenager. Because I was always a lot more outspoken than I am now.
Hmm.
And like the way I confronted him in the home when I had returned to the home. Um,
Right. Right. That does show strength. It really does. I mean, I was well into my 30s before I confronted my father because I was so terrified of him. It was very difficult. So, yeah, so that's good. So how is that going? Have your dreams gotten better?
yes, I in the last since I started Journey to Heal, the 7-step study, I think I've had two maybe very brief nightmares. And I wake up immediately and just plead the blood of Jesus. I pretend I
Yeah.
have a burning cross in my hand and I'm just scalding and burning those demons all around me. And then I'm fine and I go back to sleep. And two, I'm sure you would wake up with these dreams and then kind of, readjust, maybe turn on the TV, put on,
Mm,
YouTube, like prayer, evening, night, how they have that, where they speak the gospel and scriptures and you can fall back to sleep.
mm.
And I would have them continue. Even as I went back to sleep, the nightmare would continue, which I'm sure you know about
Yeah,
that
I
too.
do. It's awful. I do. Or I'd stay up all night because I was so
Didn't want to
fearful
go back to sleep.
that
Yeah.
would, yes. And so, right, it was terrible. I used to drink 2 bottles of red wine, if not more, just so I wouldn't dream, honestly, because the murder dream was really horrible. And I'd wake up with this, like my feet would be on this dead lady in this car and I'd be stuck in there with her. And, it's terrifying. And so I
Yeah.
just would want to drink so I couldn't dream. So, I don't drink like that anymore. And I do dream. But
Yeah.
those dreams aren't bad. But since we're talking about that, this is a really cool thing to talk about. When I was in my 20s, I had to really find out who God was because my father took my virginity and taught me about God. I was incredibly confused about who the God of the Bible was. The God of the Bible is not the God of my father, but it took me a long time to figure that out. And I'd have these horrible dreams, or these spiritual dreams, actually, that I would have like a machine gun and I'd be on this train and I was killing demons on this train. Like it was intense. Like I'd be getting off the train and running. And this one pastor told me, I know it's crazy, but he said, that's spiritual warfare. But he said, you still have a principality around you, or you wouldn't be dreaming this way. And when I removed myself
Wow.
from my family, I have to tell you, those dreams significantly reduced, very significantly reduced, because I was still trying to be around my family. And unfortunately, my mother was also a pedophile. And so she and my father were in these rooms. So when
Wow.
people don't change, you can't stay with them. I mean, and I have forgiven freely. Like, I've had anger and I've worked through my anger. I've had grief, but I gladly forgive because it separates me from them. And my dreams got better the farther I got away from them. And that's a tough message to tell people, but really, you cannot stay around abusers and think that things are going to get better. It just doesn't work, because unfortunately they continue to encase us in, the processes that they used when we were small. They're not different people. We have to
No,
become different people,
we just
right?
relate the situation differently, you know.
Yes, yes. So, did you spend a lot of time around your father as you grew up?
I really did. We went golfing together. Every Saturday, he would wake me up really early. He was a tremendous, amazing, very talented golfer. He shot in
Mm,
the 70s always, or low 70s. Um, and I loved going golfing with my dad. And of course, I got to drive the golf cart. And, I was very young when I started. I was probably 5 or 6 when I started going with him. And so, um, I don't think I drove the carts immediately, but that was just something fun that we did. There wasn't a lot of dialogue because you're constantly, hopping out, shooting, and then
right,
there's other
right,
people you're playing with too. But he was a very just eclectic person. He loved the arts. We always went to the ballet. We always went to the theater for different shows. We
right. See, and
um
I hear a lot of almost respect that you have for your father as you talk about his education and how he is. And one of the things that I actually have a very small video up on my channel, because people do not understand this dynamic, Sylvia. It's very confusing for them. Your dad sexually assaulted
confusing
you,
for us.
but yeah, I mean, we understand it, but
Yeah,
people do not get, I mean, and I was
no.
talking to this one man that I interviewed, and he said people get so mad at my dad. And for us, it's very complicated.
It is.
The design of incest is that we do have 80% of this other relationship. I played board games with my dad. I made the best popcorn around, and we'd sit down and watch a
Yeah.
movie. You know what I mean? Like, we had a normal life. We traveled all the time. My dad was the same way. He loved to travel. He loved war things, like, and so I think that they don't understand how complicated it is for us. And then sadly, though, Sylvia, is it's so abusive and wrong that when we begin to try to build relationships with other people, I think that's when we begin to see how messed up our childhoods were. Does that make sense?
No, it does. It makes
Can you talk
perfect sense.
about that a little bit? Because, I do. I hear you almost honoring him in some ways. And while I understand that greatly, this is a man that does not deserve honor in my book. This man should have been
Yeah.
walking around to his family saying, he put a life sentence on you guys that I just have to say that I think Jesus is upset about it too. But, and so
Absolutely.
it's tragic that these
Well, to me,
does that
it's so
are you kind of following what I'm saying? Help me out
yeah.
here.
It's just so tragic for me, as a daughter who sees just these wonderful aspects about
Mm,
him. We would every Christmas, every Thanksgiving, my mom eventually taught on the east side of Dallas, and very extremely, it was a private Catholic school, but a very poor, like a lot of the kids didn't have shoes. They couldn't afford the uniforms. They had a lot of really good funding from some really good uh, nonprofits around Dallas. But, my mom's heart was always with them, and she always worked in the underprivileged,
mhm,
neighborhoods.
mhm.
Um, and my father was a real giver to the community. We would go to the grocery store, we would pack up, bags of complete Thanksgiving dinners, complete Christmas, tamales, because, we're
Mhm,
Mexican. And we
mhm.
would just
I bet
go,
they're delicious. That's my
oh,
favorite food.
they're delicious.
Yes.
Um, we would go to the barrio and, just knock on doors and hand out food. And we would go, and my dad say, could we pray for you? And so they would say, sure. They would come in, and, the, the woman would make coffee, and, just, he has so many endearing qualities that I'm so grateful I got. I'm so grateful I didn't get those demon
Yeah,
traits.
yeah, yeah. See, right, and here's one of the things. I told you I'm reading this really cool book called Outrageous Outlaw, and it's a book about Jesus from John Elroy. It's an amazing book, but Elridge, I think is his name. But one of the things that Jesus did to the Pharisees was a Pharisee asked Jesus to come in and have dinner, and Jesus didn't wash his hands. And the Pharisee said, oh my gosh, you didn't wash your hands. And Jesus said, well, looking at your heart, you've got a really dark heart, but you look really good on the outside. So I guess one of the things that, we have to be careful with in these kinds of things is the only person that's good in this entire world and all the worlds around us is God, right? And so man's goodness just isn't it's not going to translate to righteousness. And so any pedophile that's listening, your goodness doesn't do any good to alleviate the sin in your life, right? And so you better get right with God. And that's all I would say about that. But I understand that. But
it's like having a resume and you have all these great things, but then at the bottom it's pedophile. It's like, okay, well,
exactly. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
exactly.
You walked on water, it doesn't.
Exactly. And that's what I'm saying, because, right, it's one of the worst crimes of hell, I think, is a crime against a child. And Jesus even said that you don't want to touch one of my little ones, because remember, he talked about it'd be better that you put a millstone around your neck and be thrown into the deepest water. So I do know that there's justice in this life, because it doesn't sound like you received any justice here for those crimes that were perpetrated against you. And they are crimes. Incest is not a family problem. It's a crime. And it's a sin in God's world. So anyway, I just want to say that, because I guess I just want to validate you, and I want to validate your experience. And I really don't care how good he was. He hurt you very deeply. And so that's all I have to say about that. I'll get off my soapbox, but I love you. It's my way of loving you. So anyway, all right. So your third thing. So I love that your dreams are better. That was a fantastic thing to bring up. And so let's talk about your third thing.
My third thing is that I would have enough braveness, and if that's even a word,
I like
courage I created a word, to be able to speak about it and not be ashamed and embarrassed.
Right.
To have that it's like a veil being lifted, from you, that, really coming into the light and really coming to healing, but to be able to help other women who have the same thing
right. And that, that's really beautiful, Sylvia, because what you're really saying is that authenticity that we really have to develop. Right. And I think that that's what God's always doing. The real God, the God of the Bible, not this fake, phony baloney religious thing. But what we want to do, though, is we want to tell this really pretty story. But unfortunately, incest is a really ugly story. And so it's hard, right? It does take courage. It takes courage to say, it's really fun to talk about all the really cool things in life, right? Like, my dad was this, my dad was that, but my dad was also a pedophile. That does take great courage. And it also, though, I think the first courageous step is to believe it ourselves. When I had to go several years ago, it was terrible, but this sodomy remembrance came back to me, and it was very violent in my body. My body hurt. You know how you have those kind of body memories that come back. And I have to tell you, I didn't want to go there. I really didn't. It's like, this part of the story, let's just leave that in the closet. Like, because he didn't want me to get pregnant. So then he sodomized me, and it was horrifying. It was so horrible that I just wanted to talk about something different. Like, let's just talk about, I can see why my other siblings go into denial, because my father was such a wicked, cruel man. It's better to tell a different story, right? And is that the bravery you're talking about?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And, you mentioned, this was another prayer that I just kind of had for myself, but, taking a shower was very triggering for me. And I thought, Jesus, I have to take a shower every day. I just don't want it to be so torturous. And right before this, it was with the nightmares and everything before I started Journey to Heal, everything was ramping up. And I know that's, the enemy and those spirits that know, inside my heart, I was ready for healing. I was ready to just spill my guts, which is literally what I did during Journey to Heal. I just emotionally just let it all out. And it was just a crazy thing. But these things do manifest. And
Yes. There's a
like
lot
you
of grief, right? I think when
there's
you
a lot
step
of
into the game of healing, there's a lot of grief. Like, oh my God, that poor little girl went through that, and that poor little girl is us,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's
And we
hard to
did that.
personalize it.
Yes. And we did that in Journey to Heal. We had to write a letter, what would you tell your little girl self?
Mm,
And carrying these women through this study,
mhm.
God does everything, and the book is so beautifully written. And every study is so imperative, acknowledgement, acknowledging what has happened to us,
Mhm.
bringing the truth to the light. One of the most beautiful things in the study is addressing that inner child. And,
Mhm.
when the women do that in the group, I mean, it's just like such a healing, because we were violated. We were innocent little
Right.
children,
Right.
you
And
know.
that was taken from us. And you don't
And
get that innocence back. You know what I mean? And that's why um it's not recovery, really. God has to redeem it. That's what I always like to use that word, because it's very different, right? It needs to be a redemptive process because it was taken, right? So I don't know. To me, right, it has to be a work of God. I see a lot of these people that move into all these modalities. While modalities are good, and I had to learn how to be mindful because I would be triggered so bad. If like I saw that murdered woman walking towards me or something, I had to learn certain modalities just to learn how to live out of anxiety, right? And so I'm really thankful for those. But a broken heart, do you know who heals a broken heart? That's God. And there is no book written that can heal your heart outside of a redemptive work of Christ, as far as I'm concerned.
no. And I love in the book on the cover, it said a healing journey
Mhm.
while, walking with Christ. So she speaks over and over in the book that it's not us, it's through Jesus
Right,
Christ. Find
right.
healing.
Because, right, I feel that sometimes people do this kind of heal yourself thing. I like a lot of what
Yes.
I see on social media is heal yourself, work harder, try.
Yeah.
Now, I
The
did have to go,
self-knowledge.
right, exactly, which I am not going to say that's bad. I went to counseling for 20 years. I really needed to, because a lot of PTSD that for me was seeing this murdered lady, and a lot of other abuse in my life as well, because it was just constant for 18 years. And so he did help me understand what my mind was doing, right? Like it wasn't a spirit that was haunting me. This was clearly a flashback that was happening. So I believe in those things, and I'm very thankful for them, kind of like Luke was a physician, right? So I do believe in those things. But then that healing part, that brokenness, that part that wouldn't quit hurting, is where sometimes, Sylvia, I would grab my Bible and hold it when I'd go to sleep, because I was single for 13 years, and I didn't live with anybody. It took me that long to really heal from my childhood, and I really took time off during that. So I think we get healed every day, right? Like I think it happens. I remember asking my counselor, is there a time when I'm done? And he said, I can't tell you, Jody, that there won't be something that triggers you at 80 that, might come back to you. That's just our reality, right? And so we have
Yeah.
to know that. But I'm not in pain like I used to be, right? And so I'm sure that's what you're finding through this work as well. But you're going to move into now running a group yourself, right? I want you to talk to me a little bit about that.
Haley is going full in with her
Yeah, I
coaching
love that.
and starting her own business. And we did two groups together.
That's
So
awesome.
we did four women the first time and three women the second time. We do up to five. And so I have full. I have 5 girls. I've been
Oh,
praying
that's
over
wonderful.
them. We start next Thursday. We'll meet every Thursday for 8 weeks. And I mean, just taking these women through this journey it's hard. It's
Mhm.
difficult every time you do it because you're hearing all their stories, you know, and when you hear these stories, it's
Right.
heartbreaking
And it can,
and
right, it can be triggering for us as well.
it can be triggering. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but Journey to Heal has an amazing mentor program and
Oh,
training
that's
that you go
cool.
through that's very, intentional. It's very, it's a great program. Like the author is just, I can't speak enough about Crystal Sutherland. She's just
That's
helping
very
so many
cool. And we'll
women.
put that in the notes. I'd like you to send me that, the link
Sure.
for that, just so, because we've talked about it quite a bit. So we'll put that in the notes for anybody that's listening.
And I did Journey to Heal one-on-one with Kaylee. It was just her and I. And this was kind of new in our strength of really discovering that we were going to be sisters in Christ and friends forever.
It's
Until we
awesome.
go to be with him. And
Best
so this
sisters to have.
yeah, exactly.
Yes.
And this just bonded us so tightly.
So
And
cool.
she was able to work through some things that she didn't even realize. Because, as you say, it's a process. We don't you could be
Hmm.
80 and you still get triggered.
Right.
Um, and so then we just bonded like it was so beautiful. And so she said, Miss Sylvia, I've been praying and I think you would be an amazing mentor.
That's so cool.
And not only do I want you to be a mentor, but I want you to be my co-leader from here on out. And
Mm.
of course, I just started falling and I was like, of course, yes. It was like a marriage proposal. I was like, I said yes.
I love it. I love it. Well, it is, I think the strongest healing is when we start giving back, right? It's almost like I'm a trainer in a law firm. And one of the things about teaching is you have to do it over and over. But when you teach something, you learn it profoundly better, right? So the same thing is
Yes,
true even when healing, when you walk with somebody else, I don't know, the journey gets stronger for you every time you walk with someone else. Every time we share our story, we get stronger. It's just true. And then helping someone like the Good Samaritan, right?
yes,
Helping somebody along is a beautiful gift to both people, right? It's such a gift back to yourself.
yes. And God really shows up and, just loves us through it. He loves me through it as a mentor. He encourages me.
Absolutely.
He heals me. And, some people like, Sylvia, gosh, how do you do that? And
Mhm.
because I know the pain.
See,
Nobody
and that,
knows our
right. And that's
like
just it. People will say that too. Jody, what you do so much. I blog every day. My daughter writes with me as well because unfortunately I married a pedophile who hurt my children. And so I had to find more courage to stay in the ring with them
I
and
hear that so much.
bring them through. Right. That was devastating for me. I would have rather
Yeah.
lived my childhood again than to have my children hurt. But anyway, yeah. So we have to give back, right? When you know the right thing to do and then don't do it, it just feels wrong, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like what, I'm
Yes.
just healed now. I get to go live this great life and just let everybody else suffer. I can't do it.
Yeah.
I can't
Yeah.
do it. So we're at
No.
time. It's been so beautiful to talk to you. I like to give the
You as
last
well.
whatever time you need to just share anything that you feel like we didn't touch on, or just for the listener, about anything that you want to share. I just like to give back to you a couple of minutes or however much time you want.
Sure. I would really just want to encourage anybody listening and anybody out there that has suffered from childhood sexual abuse and that there's healing, there can be peace, there can be life, there can be light back in your life. And I know because I sat back quietly, I can't tell you how many altar calls I've been through when, the preacher will say, if you've, suffered abuse, if you suffered abuse by your family, not specifically say, childhood sexual abuse, but it would be open. And I would sit there and I wouldn't get up and I wouldn't go because of that shame.
Mhm.
And so I understand that. I understand it takes a very brave and courageous person to step out in faith and, give it to God and but I can promise you that if you reach out to Jesus Christ, he will be there. He will catch you. He will walk beside you. He will not leave you. He will not beseech you. And I just can't encourage enough, because if you would have told me 2 years ago, I was watching Joyce Meyer. It was during COVID in the summertime, and she did a conference, but of course it was online because we weren't getting together. And after she spoke, and she spoke, about her abuse a little bit in the thing, but I sat there and I thought, oh my gosh, like I can't even imagine speaking like she does.
Sharing that. Yeah.
What a courageous, brave woman. Like I could never do that. I literally said it out loud as I was sitting on the sofa and just finished watching it. And I said, God, just bless her for all that she's doing, for the women that she's reaching. And, and now here I am. Never in a million years would I think I would be
So
willing to
cool.
do a YouTube, putting it out there, doing
Right.
testimonials with Kaylee and filming, and she's going to post it on Instagram, because that's how the enemy keeps us in shackles. He keeps us chained up. He keeps us like in a, in a
through our
vice.
silence. Yep. Through our
And
silence.
because that's, he doesn't want you to have joy. He doesn't want you to have freedom or happiness or godly friends and women that, God forbid y'all connect. And so I know that's why the enemy was so on attack with me. So I would just encourage and say, do not listen to the enemy. Don't listen to the voice. However you reach out, whether it's, through a therapist, through a group, through, sharing with somebody you can love and trust and that can help you work through it, then just do it. Take the opportunity. Take that jump. Take that leap, because you will not be disappointed. God will be there and he'll come through a million times.
Yes, he will. That every testimony I heard someone say is prophetic, because if he did it for us, right, Sylvia, he can do it for you. And I'll tell you what, I used to be in so much pain in my heart that I could barely function. I couldn't wait to get home and have wine and cry, because it was everything I could do to get through the day. Right. So when you talk about who we were to who we are today, it's just remarkably different. My counselor used to always say, Jody, you shouldn't be who you are. But I believe the thing that makes me different is that strength that God put in me when he found me when I was just a little girl. And I'm thankful for that. Thank you so much for your time. If you appreciate what we're doing here, I'd ask that you would follow and subscribe so we can continue, and we will see you next time.
Okay. Sounds good, Jody. Thank you so much.
Yes.
You have a good night.
You too.